All right, welcome to this week's live office hours. We had a week delay here. It feels weird. It feels like it's been a whole month, Casey.
Yeah, it does feel like a little bit. It's always a nice way to break up the day, kind of get the questions live. I mean, I'm obviously running chat
Yeah,
most of the time, getting those questions there, but yeah, it's kind of fun to just kind of talk about them out loud a little bit more, get a little bit more theoretical on them. But I
right.
know we're coming off the conference last week, so you kind of got a different version of this in person for a couple days in a row there last week.
Yeah, it's funny because I always get super energized with conferences, but I'm still introverted personality type. So when you talk for like 10 hours straight, you're like I'm dead inside. Like my voice is cracked. I need to like not see humans for like 4 hours. So evenings were very refreshing. Needed that, but really fun. It's funny. I was really trying to pay attention to how sellers were thinking. And I want to do the same thing at Proven Conference later this month, because that's always a good indicator for kind of what's top of mind, right? And it's funny
Mhm.
because probably I would say around 50% of the people I talked to were like Walmart. What are you guys doing anything with Walmart? Is like Monday, right? We ended up launching Tuesday. So like officially, like Walmart's live. Anybody can use it. Just add it to your account. There's no bells and whistles you have to jump through, or hoops you have to jump through to do so. Just go to marketplaces, add it. You're off to the races. So that was exciting. I'm like, cool, great timing for us. That makes a ton of sense. And then, funny enough, and this made me very happy, is a lot of people wanted to talk about AI, and not just the high level of like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Like, how are
Mhm.
things playing out? Like, kind of trying to gauge where we're at in the world. There was actually a decent amount of sellers being like, oh yeah, I'm using AI in this way. There's still a lot of people that are in the phase of, I know it can do a lot. I have some ideas, but I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I think there's like a lack of confidence, or really just time to go build and explore. But
Mhm.
there's a decent amount of sellers, luckily, doing the things I've been talking about in different ways, shapes, and form, right? Teaching themselves how to do things better, using it to write amazing SOPs, things that don't seem like a big deal. But we're not talking, somebody who just started selling 3 months ago. We're talking like big name people of and probably follow
Mhm.
and have courses from. Like, these are like relatively sizable sellers. They are using this stuff, and now they're starting to talk about it. This is where I wanted us to get to, because I knew that in the early days I was geeking with it. I knew it wasn't really top of mind in our industry, but I knew it would be eventually.
Mhm.
And I figured that at some point this year, sellers would start to experiment with it and share their experiences and how they're utilizing it. And now they're starting to experiment more. And so, there's a lot of conversations that I had where it's just like, hey, we're using it for this, or we're using it for that, or hey, we have this one process that is, kicking our butts. What do you think? And I'd be like, okay, well, look at this tool, or like, here's a blog post I wrote that like basically I already solved that problem for you. Go build it yourself. So it's fantastic. We are seeing a lot of the content creators in our space start to lean on AI for their content creation process, which makes
Mhm.
a lot of sense. That's primarily what I'm using it for, outside of like brainstorming and stuff like that, teaching myself new skills and knowledge. But I think that's a big area we're going to see in, because previously you'd have to sit down, think of some ideas, brainstorm, like, how do I clarify this? Okay, well, now how do I turn that into like a really like viral, succinct tweet, or post? And it's really time consuming. I was talking to two sellers that are pretty big. We ended up recording a podcast together, once I landed, or once I got in there, and they're like, yeah, man, we're trying to write like 3 Twitter posts a day, and like it's kicking our butt. We can basically get to 1 a day, and it's just so time consuming. Well, we had just recorded a whole podcast, and I had this guy, this little limitless pendant thing, recording it the whole time. And so I said, okay, watch this. And so I took the whole transcript, threw it in my Twitter agent, and got like, I think it was 7 solid Twitter posts from that. And they're like, dude, it's like, yeah. So people are starting to pay attention.
Mhm.
The average seller is not thinking about this stuff yet, which I think makes sense. I don't think, if you're a brand new seller and you're still trying to figure out how to source and all these things, I don't really think you need to be trying to automate processes with AI and stuff like that, right? I go back to my go-to sayings, which is like, you need to become effective before you become efficient. Otherwise, you find yourself efficiently ineffective. And so a lot of this stuff can feel hypey. And so you know, a lot of newer sellers might be like, oh yeah, I try to automate this thing, but like it didn't really change much in my business. I'm like, yeah, you know, it's more of like at scale, it's going to matter. Right now, it really doesn't. So there's a lot of conversations around that. So there's kind of like segments of sellers right now, right? You have your newer sellers that are just trying to understand the basic skill set of being a seller. You have somewhat established sellers, you know, they have a business, they have consistent revenue, all that good stuff, but they're still like really in the trenches and really trying to hone in, how do I turn this into a process that makes sense? And then you have those who have been doing this for a hot minute that are now like, okay, well, maybe I don't need to hire 5 more VAs. Maybe I can just start to, you know, teach my VAs how to use AI and all these different things. And so it's becoming more top of mind for the larger sellers right now. Not to say you can't use these things as a smaller seller, you certainly can, but I think the how matters here. You know, I was showing some people like my Claude projects, which we've talked about on office hours before. And there's like, oh, cool. Like I can learn faster now. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing here. So it was like split between AI and Walmart, funny enough, which is like kind of what we've been focusing on as a team too. Right. And so it's very interesting to see that. You were saying you're starting to see a little bit more kind of deactivations coming through from Amazon. Can you kind of dive into that? Cause I'm kind of curious what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of folks are still handling or dealing with those Section 3s from Amazon. I know we've talked about that a lot coming off of the settlements of the lawsuits last summer where they were found liable for products sold by third-party sellers. And so they are likely being overly aggressive in terms of covering their end in these scenarios. So all I can say for our sellers right now is when you're going through your purchasing orders and things, make sure you're keeping all of your receipts so you can actually prove the validity of your products and the legitimacy of your own process. Anything that Amazon may need or want, you'll want to try and keep track of. Any new sellers that may not be familiar with that might be some things that fall through the cracks. So just trying to document everything that you're doing and keeping track of it so that if you do get hit with something, you can go to Amazon and say, hey, actually, this is all legit. This is where I source my products from. These are all the receipts, and kind of proving that proof of concept isn't the right phrase, but essentially proving the authenticity is the word I was looking for of you yourself as a seller and the products that you're also selling, with them kind of having a vast majority of the third-party selling space. They're going to really do their best to make sure that they have the best sellers on Amazon, knowing that they have such a large share of that market. And if they are overly aggressive and deactivate a few folks that maybe are legitimate and it takes them a few weeks, maybe a couple months to get back up and running, then that's just part of their game at this point. But with that being said, I would still encourage sellers to do that on Walmart. Currently, haven't heard any sort of sentiment or notion of things like that on Walmart, but they do still have a terms of service that you have to abide by. So it can happen. Yeah, I'm not sure what that process looks like on Walmart or the differences between the two, but I mean, it is a business. Your business meaning as a third-party seller, so you want to protect your business with those receipts, purchase orders, invoices, anything you can keep kind of keep tabs on and provide as proof in a process like that is going to help you in the long run.
Yeah, it's interesting because on the drive down to Miami, I started seeing Twitter posts about sellers receiving apology emails from Amazon and be like, hey, you know, we deactivated this for inauthentic claims, a few different things. We reverted that. We're so sorry. You're back to normal. So, you know, going into Miami last week, I was very much like, oh, cool. Like it's sentiment from the Amazon side is starting to shift, which I kind of predicted. I was like, I think, you know, sometime this year it's going to relax a little bit. And it seems like it did relax, but it was nice to see proactivity on the support side trying to kind of, you know, help. But then to have these things come up again, it kind of makes you have to question, right? I think there's kind of two things going down right now. There's possibly a broader, I'm going to call it a phase. Like there's going to be phases where Amazon cracks down more harshly than they normally would. But then again, you're always going to have deactivations, right? Like there's the whole, like, this is happening at a macro scale. And then you broke TOS and like, at that point, it's not really Amazon's fault. They're not being mean to you. They're holding you accountable. And I try to figure out, because it's not obvious, right? They're not like, hey guys, we're going to crack down right now, right? Like you have no idea. So you're really just looking at the macro sentiment. You're trying to see, okay, is there a lot more people on Twitter, Facebook groups, whatever, talking about this? And I can clearly see that it's a larger pattern in who is getting hit, right? There are some sellers I know that are very strict about TOS. So if they're getting hit, I start to signal to my brain, it's probably a larger problem than them being targeted themselves because they broke TOS. It feels like right now we have come out of the macro phase of Q4 still. I don't think we're seeing the same volume, but you're saying like we're seeing a few more of those come through, so that there's an uptick there. I haven't seen a ton on socials yet, so I'm curious to see like if that starts to come out like today or tomorrow. That could very well be the case. But it's good to know, right? It's good to know like, okay, well now we're going into this macro phase of they're getting a little harsher on deactivations, section 3s, things of that nature. I should go ahead and prepare, right? We talked months, if not a year ago, about this idea of like risk mitigation, right? The whole emergency fund concept, where if you know something is happening and you don't know if it's going to happen to you or not, but the likelihood, the probability of that is increasing, then your risk mitigation needs to increase with that. So that could be as simple as I'm going to keep back a little bit more cash just so I can cover my expenses in case it were to occur. Look at the average time of how long those sellers are down. Some it's a few days. It could be a few months if it's really bad. So just go ahead and look at that and say, okay, well, I'm really strict about TOS. I'm going to say, I want 2 months worth of, operational costs in the bank as cash just to cover things. Because, there's a big saying in the startup world, just don't die. I love the saying. What it's trying to teach founders is, listen, if you can just still exist tomorrow as a company, the possibilities you have of solving that big, crazy problem is still good. And so what a lot of sellers do, and this came up in a lot of conversations in Miami, which was there's a lot of sellers that are running very fragile businesses right now. One deactivation, one SKU goes away, and then they crumble. You guys cannot view this as a side hustle. It's not. Now, can you do it just to make a few extra grand a month? Of course you can, but you still have to treat it correctly. You don't have a side hustle. You have a small business, and that comes with some requirements and some focus and determination. And it kind of pains me when I hear somebody be like, yeah, if I get a section 3, I'm done. I'm just folding. Why? You worked so hard to get here. Why wouldn't you fight tooth and nail to protect the asset you've built, no matter how small or large it is, and be able to be adaptable, right? Be able to come out of it. The concept of anti-fragility, right, from Nassim Taleb, right? Treating adversity as the opportunity is the interesting part, right? You have sellers like Chris Grant, right? Went through section 3, and instead of being like, well, this sucks, I'm done, he said, well, I can learn how to navigate this pretty well. And what if I turn that into content? And now I can teach other people, hey, here's how you deal with this. Here's what I did. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't work. And let's all collectively combine our knowledge of what we're learning and learn how to overcome these things as a community. So you go from, I'm just going to be done, to, yeah, we'll figure this out, right? Like, it doesn't make it less of a pain in the butt. Let's be honest. But just knowing there is a path forward is important. And again, if you have more cash in the bank, you can now say, well, I've got 3 months to figure it out. Well, if it took you 3 months to start the business, do you think you can figure out this little problem in the same time frame? Knowing what you know now and knowing that you have connections and a network and a community? Yeah, you do. And here's what's great. You're not shipping anything. There's nothing else to do in the business, right? Like you just ground to a halt. Well, guess what? The universe, whatever you want to call it, just said, cool. Here's a big, crazy problem. It's kind of scary, but guess what? You can't do anything else but solve that problem. I just gave you so much of your time back to figure it out, and you got cash in the bank so we can take our time if we need to. Go figure it out and come back stronger from it. What did you learn? Take notes on those things. If it happens again, you now know the process for overcoming that. And so, if it happens multiple times to you, yeah, the first time it's going to take a while because you don't know what to do. The second time, probably half the time, if not less, is it going to take you to overcome it again. And eventually you get to a point where you start to understand the patterns and you go, oh, well, if I just do these things ahead of time, the likelihood of it happening to me again, 10%. We went from an 80% down to a 10%. Awesome. Great. Now you've mitigated your risk and you're in a really good position. But I do think it's fundamentally a mentality problem. A lot of sellers are just like, listen, I'm just trying to make money online, do the Wi-Fi money kind of thing. This is a pain in the butt. I'm gonna go do something else. Well, okay, here's what's gonna happen to you, because I've been this person up until half a decade ago. You take the whole grass is always greener mentality and you go, well, I see a lot of people making a ton of money doing this other thing. I'm gonna go do that thing. Then what you don't realize is what they didn't tell you, which is all the crazy stuff. Which, by the way, everything has that. This is why I like telling sellers, you can make a lot of money being a drug dealer too, but you choose not to do that, right? Why? Well, it's because probably your values, and two, you want to build something. And so you can make money doing all kinds of different business models. It doesn't matter. Pick a subject. There's $1 million business there. But there are always challenges. And the only reason why that $1 million business exists is because that founder or business owner was willing to overcome those challenges and view them just as such. They're just challenges to overcome. Problems are solvable. I like this whole concept. It's vaguely attributed to Einstein, but I don't think it's actually his saying. It might just be one of those, ephemeral aphorisms, but there's two types of problems. There's physics problems and knowledge problems. I don't think anything we're trying to do here as founders, as business owners, as sellers, whatever, is trying to solve for physics, right? We're not like, how do I defy gravity right now? We're not doing that. So that necessarily means we're in the second camp. It's a knowledge problem. So you just have to figure out how to solve the problem that you clearly defined. So if I got hit with the section 3, I'm going, great, I have a section 3. What is that? Let me really understand what that is. Let me go find knowledge that already exists in terms of people teaching how they overcame it. Build up my own kind of process, test it, iterate, solve it. All right, let's move forward. But I think a lot of sellers have this preconceived notion that, well, that problem feels hard. So it almost like you're almost tricking your brain to say, like, this is a physics problem. You really have to train your brain to not have that, the amygdala in the brain. I'm gonna nerd out for a second, right? The amygdala in the brain was evolutionarily speaking developed to keep us safe. It's the fear response. It says, that's a tiger, we should run. What's crazy is it hasn't evolved past that. And now we're in a world for most of us where we're not actually having to look out for tigers in our backyards, right? But we see something or something happens to us and our brain goes, holy crap, that's a tiger. And your brain doesn't know the difference between a section 3 and a tiger. I know that sounds funny, but that is actually true, neurologically speaking. So you have to kind of train the other parts of your brain, the less amygdala heavy parts, to say, okay, well, it's a little scary, but is it a tiger? No. Am I defying physics? No. Then by definition, this is a knowledge problem. To clearly define the problem, which is half the battle, by the way, if you can just clearly define what it is, and then you can go and find the answers and solve it. Just that mentality alone would take the vast majority of sellers that we see who get hit with these deactivations go, you know what, I'm just going to stop. And they're doing 20, 30K a month. And there are sellers, by the way, doing 2 to 5K a month that are dying to be in your shoes, and you just folded when you didn't have to. But it felt scary. It felt insurmountable, but it's not.
Yeah, it's really funny. Me and my friends were big sports fans, and the term adversity is thrown around so much in sports. So we have this running joke where it's like, you don't have anything if you don't have adversity. Like, you haven't accomplished anything if you haven't run into adversity. Every Michael Jordan's famous stories, he didn't make his high school basketball team. Like, everybody runs into something at a certain point, and you do have to kind of persevere through it. And then one thing that always sticks out to me, my dad has this saying, he's like, the grass is always greener, so make sure you fertilize your lawn. Because if you keep bouncing around, then it's not gonna continue to grow. The analogy makes sense. I don't have to explain fertilizing lawns, but you really have to take the time to, build, in this case, the business, or really take the time to hone your skill, whatever it is, your hobby. Like, it does take time. You're not just going to jump in and
Totally.
be at the 90th percentile immediately. You do have to kind of chip
Yeah.
away at it and improve, and you're going to run into speed bumps. And it's just about trying to find the ways to work around them. And like you said, documenting a process, so if it comes up again, you can handle it in half the time. So,
and it's funny because there were some mental nerds at MSC, which I appreciated. They started throwing around mental models. I was like, oh, this is my group. And one of the mental models, there's hundreds, if not thousands, right? Farnham Street, fs.blog is a great place to go learn a bunch of the fundamental ones from different subjects. There's like general ones, there's physics ones, chemistry ones, biology ones. One that I've found out, it's weird to say, but I think about this a lot, is the law of entropy, because it applies to everything. And the law of entropy basically states that everything has a decay rate. It is dying. So here's a good example on the personal front. If you don't clean your house or mow your lawn, if you just stop doing it, what's going to happen? It's going to fall into chaos. Why? Why would that be? Nothing. I didn't do anything negative. Correct. But there's a decay rate there. And so if you're not actively fighting entropy, it will get worse and worse and worse. Well, what happens when you don't focus on fighting entropy in your business? So a lot of sellers do this, right? They go, well, I'm doing well, I can pay my bills. I'm just going to coast. Okay. Here's the problem. You cannot coast, because you are either growing or you are dying. And the reason why I can say that is because of the law of entropy. So if you're not actively growing, I can look at your revenue and do the math, and I can tell you when you are going to hit something called an asymptote. The asymptote is essentially when your growth rate and your decay rate equals 0. You stop growing. So what happens is you grow, you start to slow down, you hit the peak, and then you start to die. And if you're not waking up every morning and saying, how do I fight entropy today in the business, you're going to be in a bad position. That's why I don't think you can really treat this as a side hustle. It can be a small business, don't get me wrong, but you do have to give it focus and attention. There's countless sellers that I personally know who have gotten to a great place revenue-wise, millions a year. And then they're like, yeah, I'm just going to, hand off some of the operations to whoever, just kind of chill, take the cash. Talk to them 2-3 years later. I was like, how's it going? Yeah, we're doing like 150K a year right now. Great. I can tell you, I don't have to ask follow-up questions. I don't need that. I already can tell you what happened. And so part of fighting entropy is understanding the things that can take you backwards, like these deactivations, these section 3s. And so if you can preemptively say, okay, well, I see that they're happening, hasn't happened to me yet. Let me go understand them. I'm spending an hour just to really understand them, start to collect some information that I'm finding for like how to approach them and how to overcome them, just in case. Even just doing that for 1 hour is you fighting entropy. You're fighting decay, because eventually when it does happen, you're like, cool, I'm not starting from 0. I already understand what it is, already kind of have a general idea of who I need to go talk to. I've got some articles saved, some videos saved in my notes. Let me just shift my focus. I already have the information. Great. And, if you want to take that a step further, great. Go create a Claude project called, Amazon Deactivation Coach. Throw all that information in there and maybe don't talk to it for 6 months. But then it happens. You go, great, just got hit with this. What are the first things I need to do? And it goes, okay, well, I've already read all the things you gave me. Here's exactly what you need to do. And now we can go back and forth and solve that problem and brainstorm different solutions. But I geek out with this stuff because as a founder, over time, you start to learn these things that you're like, well, I don't understand why this happens, right? We didn't change anything. Yeah, we didn't make it better, but we didn't change anything either. So why would it start to perform worse? Law of entropy. That's why. Because the outside market is changing, even if you're not. Other sellers, even if you're coasting, other sellers are not coasting. And so even if you have amazing wholesale accounts, given enough time, I can probably steal one from you. And then I just took, if we're, taking an 80-20 approach to this, I just took one of your accounts that, let's say it's 5 SKUs, that's doing 80% of your revenue. And I took half the slice of the pie. So I just cut your revenue by a meaningful amount. And you're like, well, I didn't do anything bad. Correct. But you weren't growing either. And so there are outside variables, outside things that also can lean on the decay rate. So, it's fun. It's fun to dive into some of these mental models as a seller and say, okay, well, which one applies to me as a seller? Because not all of them apply to everyone. And then how can you use that information to shift your thought process, your perspective on problems, on all these different things? And what's so nice is it gives you a framework. Charlie Munger, so Berkshire Hathaway talks about building a lattice of, what did he call it? A lattice of mental models. And all he's saying is like, listen, some of these things intercorrelate, but if you have like the right set of mental models, it's going to help you understand how to think. And this gets into first principles, right? What a lot of sellers do is they don't use first principles. They use the inverse, which is called analogies. Well, somebody told me this, therefore it must be true. Okay. Well, first principles would state, well, let me go look at the data and let me go check in with reality and see what is true. And we did this with repricing. I had some preconceived notions through analogies, being a seller, as to how repricing worked and how it did not work. And then we started a repricing company. Then you start looking at the actual data, the actual performance. You go, whoa, everything I was told is actually wrong by like 80%. So now we need to, change our thought process here. So again, there's a bunch of those. Go to fs.blog. We're not affiliated, anything like that. The guy who runs is like ex-CIA NSA dude, but got like really geeked about all this stuff and basically writes about it full time. But there are some things that, you can lean on to be like, well, I have this big problem. So one thing we've already been talking about is, can you view these problems, these setbacks as opportunity? Well, technically there's a mental model that I'm using there called inversion. Can you just invert it? This is the world's biggest problem. It's going to shut me down. Invert it. This is the best opportunity that could ever happen to me. And me overcoming this is going to set me up for massive success in the future. Is either one true? They're both true. It's the whole Yoda thing, right? Or I think it's Yoda, right? But you know what I'm talking about? It's like, It's basically, if you think it's good or bad, you're right. It's basically what it boils down to. But it's all perspective. So it was nice to see sellers having this level of conversation. I'm very much over the past decade or so, I've seen a lot more conversations related to tactical things, which nothing wrong with that. But now I think we as a community are starting to get back to the foundations of things because we're having to, because the tactics are so short-lived now that you can't learn a tactic and build $1 million business off of it like you could a decade ago, because those tactics lasted on average much longer. Now that's the inverse. And so now people are like, well, that worked. Yeah, it worked for 2 weeks. Like, who cares, right? Previously it worked for 2 years. So now we're having to say, okay, well, I need a better way to think. I need to understand the foundations of a lot of things. Even on the wholesale side, there's a big push on just emailing distributors. Why? Because it's easy. But I've been saying for decades, you need to do brand direct, and people are like, it's harder. Correct. But if you look at the math on it, it actually checks out more. And they're more protected accounts, especially if you can get exclusives. And now I'm seeing a lot more people be like, we only do brand direct. We don't work with distributors unless we have to. And so it's so funny to see like that kind of get resurged back up. And I'm like, man, we were talking about this stuff a decade ago and it was considered like a faux pas. Like, why are you taking the hard road? Okay. But now that's becoming like the baseline.
Yeah. Everything worth doing is always harder than it should be, or not that it should be, than the easy route.
It makes you appreciate it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Everything worth having is going to be difficult to overcome. It's funny because everything that felt like the most disastrous thing in my life ended up being the best thing in hindsight. I just couldn't see it because hindsight's 2020, right? And so it's hard sometimes. You kind of have to remind yourself. I mean, I've been going through a bunch of stuff on the personal front and like, oh, this really sucks. But I kind of have to, be like, okay, well, yeah, it sucks. But every time I felt this way, it's worked out. So maybe I just trust the process here. And like, I think I'll be okay. And it just helps relieve a lot of the stress. It helps relieve a lot of the pressure on certain things. Because a lot of times we give too much weight to things like the section 3s, the deactivations, right? People immediately go to, well, the business is done. No, the reality is you might be shut down for 30 days. You'll be fine. Like, again, just don't die as a company. Just exist on day 31 and you're back up and running and you're gonna be like, that sucked, but we're still here. And just know that a lot of your competition are not going to do that. they are just going to fold. And so a lot of people will view these section 3s and these deactivations as a, signal that it's, too risky and all these different things. I view it differently. I'm like, no, man, this is getting rid of, in some cases, low quality sellers. In other cases, people who are not taking it seriously enough. Does it happen to regular sellers that are just doing everything right? Yes, it does. But the sellers who basically just fold because of this happened, you removed a competitor. Does it suck? Of course it does. But again, there's different perspectives in terms of how to view these things. And the more you can hone your mind to do that, the less kind of stress you are. You're like, yeah, things are going to happen, but like, we're still here. I've had worse things happen. I'm still here. So I think we'll be all right. We just got to work the problem.
That's adversity.
It made me, I haven't seen it because I'm not a big sports guy, but my stepdad is a big Michael Jordan fan. There was a documentary or docuseries that came on Netflix about basically him overcoming adversity, and everybody in the mental game was like, dude, that's the thing to go watch. If you really want to understand adversity and how to overcome it, that's what you go and watch. I have not done it yet. I need to. I can't get down on the sports analogies, man. I can't get into it as much because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if that's good or bad.
That is a great docuseries for anyone who hasn't seen that. The Last Dance. That's very well done. The interview is very interesting. Michael Jordan, there's a famous thing that's become a meme where he goes, and I took that personally, and then he goes off and scores like 50 points in a game, stuff like that. But no, that's a great one. And there was one other sports documentary that just came out. That's another kind of similar. The Celtics one is very good right now, kind of going through the different eras, and they're focusing on how like the game changed and all that. But yeah, adversity. It'll push you through to the other side, to the greener side. But
yeah, exactly. Awesome. So I know we got a bunch of people in here. I know we're just kind of jamming right now, sharing some stuff, some of our thoughts, but this is open office hours. So there really is no format here. So if you have any questions, anything you want us to dive deep into, please throw it into the comments. We're more than happy to deep dive and go down any rabbit holes that you guys have. See, I know Angel here. Congrats on going live with Walmart Repricer for everyone. Been using the beta and look forward to seeing it grow with futures in the future. Yeah. So we, I think we got a little over 100 beta users at peak, which was awesome. So it's like enough sample size to really kind of find any kind of issues, stuff like that. And yeah, we've been tracking it. I've been doing deep analysis on this 1 to 2 times a week of just like, how's everybody progressing, all these different things. And it had the highest activation rate of anything we've launched thus far. And that's not like qualitative, us asking you, how's it going? No, that's like pure data. And we're segmenting sellers, right? So I'm looking at sellers who, what percentage of their Walmart listings are they actively repricing is kind of what I was breaking sections down into. And every single week, the power user section, which is like you're doing 75% or more of your listings that are repricing, kept going up and up. And it's funny because initially we had like, kind of testers where like it's like less than 25%, decent amount of people in the middle, still a decent amount in the upper end. And what's so funny is the middle just kind of disappeared towards the last week of the beta. It's just like everybody migrated over to the power user, and I was like, oh, that's nice. So it's not just like, oh, I'll test it on a listing here or there. It was no, I put it on everything, and like I love it. So the feedback has been absolutely phenomenal. I know I got a bunch of our affiliate partners that are wanting to have, live calls and stuff like that for us to like dive deep into that and teach. So look out. We will be doing a lot more of those coming soon. Let's see here. If I haven't really been preparing for possible section 3s and deactivations, what can I do to maybe backtrack and prepare for overcoming that? Sorry if this is a really basic question. It's not basic question. This is a great question. First and foremost, I think you need to understand what a section 3 is and how it happens, or a deactivation, right? We kind of need to build this model of like, what are all the permutations, all the possible things that could go wrong. Section 3 is one. There's other kinds of deactivations. Go kind of map those out, and then understand, especially if you're seeing things on socials, like what deactivation are they getting? Is it a section 3? Is it something different? If you're seeing a lot of section 3s, if you understand what those are and how they occur, it makes it easy for you to go Google, what causes that, and then if you understand what causes it, you can pretty much understand what would prevent it as well. Do the inverse, right? So it's like, okay, well, I'm getting a bunch of inauthentic claims and they deactivated me. Okay, well, what would cause deactivation, or what would cause inauthentic claims? Well, I probably don't have good enough invoices or receipts. Okay, well, how do we define good enough? Look at TOS, what they're posting on seller forums, everything like that, and then say, cool, I'm going to not do it that way. I'm going to do it the right way. Can you backtrack? It's a little harder from what I understand. Like you can't go, like if you're doing RA, you're not going to go back to Target and just be like, hey guys, I need a different kind of receipt, right? Like that's not how this works. But there are some things you can do to like kind of protect yourself moving forward. Or a guy, I dig it. Is there any way to make Maven slightly more aggressive? I love the simplicity of it, and I find that it does well for 80% of my listings, but 20% doesn't seem to be winning buy box. I know I could make a rule-based strategy, but I'm wondering if Maven specifically can be more aggressive. So Maven won't become more aggressive. We designed it in that way for the outcome that it gives you. And you're right that it's not going to work for 100% of your listings. That 80-20 makes sense to me. So what we recommend is this life cycle approach, right? So you're looking at like the age of inventory, right? So as your inventory is aging, so getting older, long-term storage fees, opportunity cost of your capital, all that stuff starts to become big variables. You do want to become more aggressive. In those cases, I actually do recommend a rule-based strategy. And the way we do this is we say, okay, well, when it first comes into stock, it's got, let's say max 30 days of age of inventory. Let's go to Maven. Once it gets to day 31, and older, we start to become more aggressive. That's when we do switch over to rule-based strategies, because you can make those pretty much as aggressive as you want. What's nice there is you can automate that entire switching using workflows. So instead of you having to go in and be like, well, this one's not moving fast enough, I need to do this. I know a lot of sellers have this idea that, well, if I don't sell X number or have this velocity in 3 days, I need to change something. That's not always true. It could be a weird 3 days. I mean, just to be frank, right? It could be there's a lot of competition. Somebody's doing some weird stuff. They're liquidating, but then it bounces back, and it bounces back in 5 days. And you would, in that case, want to still be using Maven because we can still, pull the buy box back up higher, have healthy profit margins, all that good stuff. But if you were to become aggressive after that, or before that transition happened within that first 5 days, you're going to stay aggressive when you didn't really need to be. So I tend to tell sellers, look at things through the lens of time. It's not just, well, it's not moving super fast the first 3 days. It's not a good benchmark. A lot can happen. Even being a seller, there were weeks where I'm like, that was just a weird week. And then it bounced back 2 days later. I'm like, okay, right. And that could be an entire marketplace thing. I have seen this with an Aura where we're like, man, sales are really just lagging right now, like across the board. And we're looking, we're like, nothing's going on. That's a big flag. And then the next day it kicks back off. You just have these weird times where it could be that the mass populace is focused on other things. That could be massive news, could be elections, things of that nature. We've seen that happen before. It could be things that are not as easily identifiable. And so you want to take a broader perspective on it, right? Because again, you could become too aggressive and then tomorrow everything unlocks and now you're being too aggressive when you didn't need to be. So I tend to say, give it 30 days. If you're still not moving things as fast as you want and you still are holding inventory, now become more aggressive. That tends to work well, because what a lot of sellers do is they want to nitpick every little thing. And guess what? You end up finding yourself spending 2 hours plus a day in your repricing software. But what if you spent those 2 hours a day sourcing? You'd do better. And so, there's a Twitter post, I think it was yesterday, somebody was like, yeah, I like that Aura. I don't have to micromanage it. And somebody's like, well, I want to micromanage it. Neither is right or wrong. But in terms of valuing your time, because the person was basically saying, hey, like there's a lot of money to be made in micromanaging your repricing software. I think one, depending on what you're using, you might have to micromanage it because it's not designed well. That's a different problem. You need a different repricing software. However, you inking out an extra $10 a day, spending 2 hours to do so, means you're working for $5 an hour. And how much is your time worth sourcing? So like, yes, you can ink out more sales in theory doing that, but not nearly as much as spending that same amount of time buying more inventory. And so you have to understand the value of your time. Anything, Casey, you want to throw onto that?
No, I think that was really well said. I was trying to think of something to add and I couldn't think of anything. I think you nailed it.
Nice. That's what I get for speaking a lot in Miami. I'm ready to go. I'm locked in.
Yeah, you are dialed in today. I did see or guy followed up with a hyperdrive question there.
Yeah.
I will throw that on the screen. And just to kind of describe how hyperdrive works, essentially, what's considered instant repricing from Amazon standard is the time it takes to submit a price update to Amazon, which is typically between 90 and 120 seconds. So right around that 2-minute mark. Hyperdrive cuts that submission time down to less than 10 seconds. So it will increase the speed at which your price updates are submitted, but it won't increase the number of updates that are made. So that's a slight difference there in terms of understanding, where we'll still make those updates based on your strategy and your strategy settings, but that submission time is going to be significantly shorter. That does give you a major leg up over your competitors who may be using what is considered instant repricing. You can essentially reprice 10 times faster than them. So if they're submitting an update, you're able to kind of respond to it more quickly. And then by the time they submit their update, when it's in process, you're able to kind of jump in front of that update before it may even go live on either the Amazon listing. Currently only the Amazon listing. We're working on providing hyperdrive on Walmart, but that is definitely the biggest competitive advantage feature that we provide, and that is an Aura exclusive feature. So if you're not using all your hyperdrive credits, I recommend using all of them, and I always recommend using them on listings where there is a high amount of price activity. Whether that's typically, if you're the only seller on a listing, you won't want to use hyperdrive. There's really no point. You won't be competing with anyone. But if there's like, say, 5 sellers on a listing or 20 that are very active, definitely good listings to be using hyperdrive on to kind of have that little competitive advantage there.
Yeah. Let's see. I've been wanting to try Maven instead of buy box targeting. To my understanding, Maven is like the peak balance between profit and sales velocity. Are there any tips or videos that I should watch for setting up Maven, or is it pretty self-explanatory? You just nailed it perfectly. So that is, whenever you're talking about repricing, especially building strategies, you're manipulating 2 levers that oppose one another. You have sales velocity and profit margin. These 2 things typically go against one another. So if you want to make more money, you want to increase your profit margin, that goes up, but sales velocity tends to start to go down, right? Basic economics. If I go from $25 to $50, the percentage of people in the market that are willing to pay that dramatically dwindles, right? So I can kind of anticipate that. Inverse is also true. If I really wanted to liquidate my inventory and really move and get my capital back, well, my sales velocity is going to go up, my profit margin is going to go down. Okay. Historically, these are the only 2 things we've done as sellers. We've said here or here, nothing in between. Why? Because it's hard to do, because we call this balance the can't think today. Casey gave me the word, the balance here. The optimal price. Sorry. Price? Yeah. There we go. Optimal price. Sorry. My brain just completely shut down on me. The optimal price. Well, that optimal price is not a fixed thing. I mean, the optimal price can fluctuate minute by minute, hour by hour, second by second in some cases. So it's hard as humans in using basic repricing software to calculate this, and 2, use that as a target to get to. So what's nice about that is there's a lot of complexity in terms of how it works, but in terms of how to set it up, I don't think we even have a video on it. I mean, well, we have like the intro video, me explaining this kind of same stuff. It's one setting. You just say, here's how I want you to set my min values, 15% ROI, profit margin, fixed profit, whatever. We say, great. That's all we needed from you. Like, assign it, enable it, and we'll take care of everything for you. So there is no setup outside of just how do you want to calculate your min values. And then you just assign it, enable repricing on the listings, and you're done, which is really nice. The whole goal for us as a company is, how do we take highly complicated things that actually does increase performance, right? Getting back to that whole concept of micromanaging your repricing software. Well, what if your repricing software micromanaged itself? Right? Like, that's kind of where my mind goes. Well, that would be highly complicated and would require a lot from you as a user. But if we built it the right way, like we have with Maven, it's going to do a lot of the hacks that a lot of sellers have done over the years, and it's just going to do it better and without you even having to realize it. So like, I like that a seller, brand new seller, can jump in and start using Maven. Never hear the term yo-yo strategy, raise my price to max, all these different things, all these little subtle hacks that sellers have developed over time that do work. You don't have to ever know that those concepts exist, but you're getting the benefits of them, and you're getting better performance than the seller who's doing it the old school way. So the old school way is once an hour, midnight, 2 a.m., take all my prices and do 30% above the buy box or go to my max price. Well, why are we doing that? Well, we're hoping we can reset the market and get sales higher than the buy box. Okay, great in theory. How do you know that every hour is the optimal time to do that for every single listing? How do you know that midnight is? There's some rationale that gets thrown around, but it's not good enough in my opinion. And two, how do you know that where you're going is reasonable? If you're going 30% above the buy box, that's fine. Sometimes you could go 50% above the buy box. Sometimes 20% is plenty and actually going to get you a sale. Just because your prices went up and you got 0 sales does not mean anything, right? The only time you should be excited is when your price was raised and you got a sale. Otherwise, it's all vanity. So Maven basically does all that for you, and it could raise your price once a minute, could be once a day. It depends. What does it depend on? The listing dynamics and behaviors itself. So we go away from this whole like, well, you do it once an hour and we just hope that we get lucky. I don't like luck. I would rather say, when can we do that behavior in a way that we have an 80% chance of getting what we ultimately care about, which is money back in our pockets? Now let's do it. Otherwise, we don't. So if you know, it makes you feel productive because you're like, oh, cool, my prices are jumping. Great. But you got 0 sales. So like, it looked cool. It didn't mean anything for your bottom line. That's what I care about.
Yeah. So
Love
yeah,
it.
just to follow up on Maven, very simple to set up. Like Dylan said, there's not even a how-to video on it because it's really how do you want your mins and max prices to be set, and then the auto unsuppressing buy box setting is really the only thing we do recommend keeping that checked. That'll have Maven slowly drop your price to try and unsuppress that buy box until it's either unsuppressed or your min price is reached. If you don't want it to do that, just uncheck that box. I am going to post in the chat here just 2 separate articles that we do have on Maven. That first one I just pinged in there is just our Maven best practices. So definitely recommend just reviewing that just to kind of keep yourself up to speed there. And then this second one is how its logic will work in a handful of different scenarios. It works on game theory. So if it realizes that another competitor is continually pricing under you, it'll just match their price so you don't run into any price tanking. So just a couple helpful resources there in the Maven space to kind of make sure that you have a good grasp of how it's going to operate, and then you can allocate it to your listings accordingly.
Yep. And follow-up question here. So for Hyperdrive, there are credits. So depending on what plan you're on, so everybody gets Hyperdrive, everybody gets Maven, just a different like level of usage. So we go from, what is it, 10 up to 100 right now, depending on what tier you're on.
So I think on early stage, it is 5 Hyperdrive credits. Essential plan is 10. Plus is 25, and then Pro, I believe, is 100 there.
Yeah. So, you know, in an ideal world where we could do this unlimited, which unfortunately we're not in an ideal world, I would say apply it to everything because you have nothing to lose. There is no negative thing that can happen. Right now, because there are technical limitations to how many we can do this with, you really need to understand like which ones you want to apply it to. And what Casey was saying previously is look at listings where you have a high number of price updates. That means basically there's a lot of competition that's occurring. That's where it's going to be beneficial. Now, we are talking about ideas of introducing something like autopilot for Hyperdrive, where, you know, instead of you having to make those decisions, and let's face it, you're not going to make it once an hour. You're going to do it once a week. What if Aura could just do it for you like once an hour? You forget about it. Just say one toggle, do it for me. I'm going to go source more inventory. We go, great. Once an hour, we'll self-balance and make sure we're, you know, if you have 25 credits, we're making sure the 25 listings that are using it are the ones who could actually benefit from it. So we are looking at stuff like that as well. That's going to be fun. It's literally just going to feel, you know, I've been telling sellers, you can automate 90% of your Aura account. If we add Hyperdrive with an autopilot functionality, I think you get closer to 95%, if not 98%. It's pretty nuts. Oh yeah. There was a can you the one with the thumbs up? Okay, let's see. Recently, I've been auto ungating for smaller brands since reaching 10K sales. How does inauthentic claims and invoices look on those since I'm auto approved? It's less about being auto approved. You can still have problems with those. It's nice to have, but you still need solid invoices. I don't know the ins and outs. Again, I haven't been seller in a hot minute, so I don't know the actual details of it. But I know there's a lot of sellers who do. So just go on Twitter. Somebody will tell you. If not, they've already written about it. Especially if you're like working with brands, like doing wholesale and stuff like that. That was the upside of doing wholesale. Like whatever documentation you needed, you got it, right? Like I remember I was selling a infant toy, and Amazon wanted, I think it was called a CPC document, basically like certifying that it's not like swallowable and things of that nature. And they're like, hey, dude, you can't sell this unless you have this. I go, okay, cool. So I, called the brand, said, hey, I need a CPC. They go, oh yeah, we have one file. I just emailed it over to you. I upload it. They're like, looks great. Move on. It is harder to do those things with RA and OA. It just is. Because you don't have anybody to go ask. I'm not going to go to target.com and be like, hey guys, can you give me a CPC document? They're like, no, like that's on you. So it really just depends. So you really need to understand your model and what kind of documentation you need to protect yourself, and how that is done. And there are cases like with RA and stuff like that, where you get a receipt. You're not getting an invoice. You have a receipt, and you can't be like, I want a different version, please. They go, bag it up and take it out. Like, like I have a line. So you do have to kind of work within some constraints. But if you understand what brands, what retailers tend to have more problems, it will help you avoid those problems. So there might be, retailers where it is very profitable, but they run into far more issues for whatever reason. It's kind of like, certain categories sell like crazy. It looks super profitable, but then you look at it and you're like, there's a 20% return rate. So it looked profitable. In reality, is not that good. It's not bad, but it's not that good. Like clothing and stuff like that. It's a good example. Can you make money with it in volume? Of course you can, but you have to basically factor in the return rate into your profitability and how much you're willing to pay. And so the math needs to still check out. Hopefully that makes sense. I wish I had exact answers for you, but these things are also changing and evolving month after month at this point. So
yeah, I would recommend trying to find an online community. Enough sellers have gone through Section 3 deactivations, especially in the last 6+ months at this point, that I'm sure there's a lot of chatter in terms of things that are required, best practices, ways to kind of get out of a Section 3 and things like that. It probably does differ from seller to seller, but that'll be a good kind of source of knowledge there.
Nice. Love this. We'll take y'all's advice and keep the future adversities in mind, pushing through it. That's what I'm talking about. Love that. Glad that conversation landed well. And not just like, what are you guys talking about? Talk about repricing. So appreciate that. That's awesome. I like that we can get on here, not be super formatted, and just like kind of geek out on different things, because I feel like there's a lot of things that don't get to be said in our space that are valuable, that do help. A lot of times people are like, just teach me to source. It's like, I mean, yeah, you need to learn how to source, but there's so much more that you need to learn that would help you source better. That is not sourcing skills, like it's just, it's crazy. But we're not great as an industry, in my opinion, on focusing on the fundamentals, but it seems like that's starting to shift a bit, which is making me very, very happy as a human. Awesome. Yeah, so I know we got about, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it'll be interesting to kind of learn and continue to learn about the Walmart space and fundamentals in the Walmart space. I know right now we're trying to work on providing a lot of feature parity between what we provide for Amazon and what we provide for Walmart, but what we provide for Amazon may not be what's best for Walmart. Specifically, I know a lot of folks are looking for a maintenance section, trying to increase their prices when they become the buy box winner. That's not always the best case scenario, especially on Walmart. Yeah. The buy box
doesn't really transfer well
differently. Yeah. So on Walmart, it is kind of what we've been referring to as a wait in line system. Once you win the buy box, you actually maintain the buy box until you either sell out or raise your price. So raising your price when you win the buy box could actually cause you to lose that buy box, as opposed to maximizing margins, which it does on Amazon. So
Yeah.
with that being
And they
said, we
don't
are
rotate
working
the
on
same, right? So like,
exactly.
if you got it, keep it, because you're getting a
Mhm.
crap ton of sales, and once it rotates out, you're getting nothing. So it's not
Right.
like the way Amazon's buy box rotates, where we can kind of share it here and there. They're like, no, dude, you got it. You're on the shelf until you sell out, basically, or better price comes in. So the dynamics are vastly different. So although we could, in theory, just do feature parity with what we do on Amazon, we do want to be hesitant in some areas to say, yes, you could do that. However, it would not give you the same level of performance or outcomes that you would anticipate coming over from Amazon. And actually, you're going to have a bad time. So we are trying to be very cognizant of building and expanding Walmart, especially on the strategy side, in a way that lends itself to you doing well, even if you don't understand these things. So some things you're like, why don't you have that? Here's why. Could we? Sure. Why do you want it? Because you expect it to work like Amazon does it. It does not.
And so, yeah, as we continue to learn and release more features and everything like that, we're also going to be adding more to our help docs space, not in the form of pure help docs, but also knowledge-based docs, trying to educate everybody as we are also learning in the Walmart space to get started. So, yeah, as always, we're here to help in office hours. Come and chat with your questions. If we don't have answers, we'll be happy to kind of go through some research, come up with a nice resource doc for you folks. And yeah, we're in this together to help maximize that inventory for you.
That is very accurate. Awesome. So if there's no additional questions, we will end it here for time. Appreciate everybody making the time. A lot of you guys here today, which is fantastic. Appreciate all the great questions. Keep in mind, this is open office hours, meaning there is no format. We just jump in. We'll start to geek out with you guys, but we really want your questions so we can dive deeper and make sure this is a high value hour for you every single week. We do this every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. EST. We will be back next week. I know we were not in last week because of the conference in Miami, but we will be back here next week. With that, we will let you get back to the rest of your week and enjoy it.
Yeah, have a good week, folks.